Richard D. Wolff is Professor of Economics Emeritus at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. His educational background includes a BA in History from Harvard College, a MA in Economics from Stanford University, a MA in History as well as a PhD in Economics from Yale. He is a co-founder and contributor of Democracy at Work, a nonprofit organization that promotes democratic workplaces as a key part of a transition to a better economic system. The New York Times Magazine has named him America's most prominent Marxist economist.
Let's go in reverse order. There's no question in my mind that money is a societal creation. It always was, and societies that were organized in a different way did not have money, had no need for money. The human race has existed without money for thousands of years. There's nothing inevitable, necessary, or absolute about money at all. Number one. Number two, mostly what money has done has been a way to facilitate, to extend the process of exchange. That's why it almost always has to do with economies in which the mode of distribution, how you get goods and services from the producer to the consumer, is by means of an exchange. In those societies that use exchange, money eventually arises because it's part of the process of making exchange general in the society. Going from the occasional, when, for example, one farmer has a little bit extra milk from his cow, more than he can consume, and so he arranges to meet at a place called a market and give his extra milk to somebody who can give him extra potatoes or something. That's an occasional exchange. Societies that are self-contained have those moments, but they don't need money to make it happen because it's an occasional activity that supplements what is normally handled within the farm or within the farm community. When, however, the exchange becomes general, when people stop producing for use and occasionally exchange, but in fact begin to produce with the full intention of exchanging what they produce for many other goods, then it becomes difficult and awkward to make one-by-one exchanges. And so everybody finds the convenience of one particular thing to act as the universal equivalent. And we have many examples in history. Seashells play that role. Particular metals play that role. Sometimes special plants or trees play that role. Eventually, gold and silver, because they last a long time and they can be made into small pieces, so you can work it out. It's very practical, having to do with exchange. And then, once you have money as a mechanism of exchange, then it can take on other qualities. For example, a way of holding your wealth. Instead of holding your wealth as so many cattle or your wealth as so many acres of land, you can begin to hold your wealth in the form of the money, because the money can be transformed, you hope, into goods and services when you wish. And so slowly money becomes a more powerful, general used item. But the very process of that can also go into reverse. That is, if you have social changes and economic changes of a certain kind, then you will need money less than you did before, and then the money will disappear in the same way that it appeared. There is nothing absolute, there's nothing universal, there should be no reason to fetishize the money and to imagine that it has some mystical quality that it must always be there. It doesn't. And let me give you a final example. In our society, too, in modern capitalist society, there are many occasions where you have production, consumption, and no exchange and no money. Let me give you an example. In your family, your parents invite you, your friends, and some relatives to come to the house for dinner. And you have 12 people get together, and your mother, let's say, makes a beautiful dinner of some kind in the kitchen, and then with great pride, she comes into the dining room and she says, I have here a wonderful roast of some sort of meat and some vegetables. And with great excitement, she distributes the meat and the potatoes to you and your friends and everybody. Production is going on. She produced the meal. Distribution is going on. She distributes what she produced to a group of consumers. This is an economic arrangement, but there's no exchange. You are not expected to take your shirt off and give it to your mother in order to get your meal. There is no, and there is therefore no exchange of money. She doesn't reach you a piece of chicken and say, $5 please, or €6 please. She's not going to do that because it doesn't belong. So here's an economy, production, consumption by different people. Mother produced, you consume, but there's no exchange and there's no money. And indeed, it's even more important for this. If when your mother gives you a piece of chicken, you were to take your wallet out of your pocket and peel out a €5 note and give it to her, you would be insulting her. She would be angry. Your father would be angry. He would say something to you like this. This doesn't belong here. This is offensive what you are doing. We love each other here. We get together out of liking one another and wanting to be together. What you're doing is bringing in an institution that we don't like and that we don't want here in our family meal. And if you ask, why not, Father, he will say to you, because that's a relationship that is the opposite of love and caring for one another. We don't want it. This is not about an exchange. And when I tell that story in my classes, I like to end up provoking the students. If bringing the market and money into the home where goods are produced and distributed is the antithesis of love, then maybe it plays exactly the same role in the larger community. Well, good question, but again, it has to be a little bit addressed as a question. There are two ways to talk about money being in the hands of a small number of people. One is the obvious notion that some people are very rich and have a lot of money, and other people are very poor and have no money. And why is that allowed in a society? Good question. I'll come to it in a minute. But there's another way that you can also ask this question, which is, we allow the system of money, and by that I mean how much money there is circulating in a society, what rules governing its use are in place. For example, what rules about whether I lend you my money for a year, how much do you have to pay me in interest to have access to my money, how we relate to one another around money. We allow most of those issues to be handled by a very particular set of institutions. Most of those institutions are called banks. And we arrange this in a way that is extremely peculiar. Here's what the peculiarity is. In a modern capitalist economy, we all depend on money. We have to earn money, we have to be able to spend money, we need to borrow money, we need to save money. We all depend on the conditions of money. Interest rates, how much money there is, who has it, it's very important to us. But we allow the key decision makers to be the banks, in institutions that are capitalist institutions, who proceed to make decisions over the money that we put into them, we are the people, but they do make those decisions in order to maximize their own profit. This is very peculiar, because if we all depend on the monetary system, why are we, the mass of people, not in charge? How do we allow, why would we allow a tiny group of people, the owners and operators of banks, to be in such a tremendously powerful position? Number one. Number two, the only other powerful player in the world of money is the government. Because in the end, the government has to enforce the relationships of money. In other words, if I give you a loan for a year of $1 million, and at the end of the year, you must give me back my money with interest. And suppose the end of the year comes, and you laugh and tell me you're not interested in talking with me anymore, and you're not going to give me the money back. What am I going to do? I have to have, for money to work, there has to be an enforcement mechanism. I have to be able to pick up the telephone, call somebody, call the government, and begin to put pressure on you to do what I need you to do. So money, if it works, is now in the hands of the banks together with the government. And since the banks have all the money, they make sure that the government does what they want, and they're in a position to make that happen. So the rest of us are left, the vast majority, to live within the framework of what the banks and the government together do in controlling the monetary system. For me, this is the negation of any claim to democracy that modern capitalism could possibly put forward, because it has organized so central an institution as money in the hands of a tiny group of people. But then again, once you see it, you realize that that's the way capitalism always works. Your automobiles are controlled by a tiny group of people. That's why the whole world, I excuse myself for talking to people in Germany about this, but that's why people in the whole world are now horrified as they read every day about the decision of the Volkswagen Corporation to make more money by pushing into the air pollution that causes asthma, emphysema, lung cancer. They didn't care. They subordinated the health question to the profit question. That's how capitalism works. And we allow the monetary system to function in the same way. And since capitalism allows a small group of people to have so much power, it isn't very surprising that they use their power in this system to enrich themselves, which explains in the end why some people have a great deal of this money and the rest of us don't.